Hey everybody, welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How are you? I hope your brain stopped smoldering from part one of our ETs, why are they here, history, all of the facts and the data. Part two today, we're going to move on into what is the ET plan for the Earth? Why are they coming here in the first place? You know, in part one, I talked a lot about what it's like to, really see the technology that these beings are trying to communicate with me. And I've got a pretty good science head on my shoulders. Overall, there's some elements that we don't have on this planet that I ask for some substitutions, or I just research myself or figure it out or whatever. I love puzzles. And, we're coming up with some cool stuff, me and my off-world pals. I'm sure I'm not the only person they're working with. They're probably working with millions of people trying to get this point across so that we can get this green energy out there in these incredible energy devices. As a matter of fact, there are people who probably have already developed these devices, and there might be large corporations that are sitting on their patents, which I'm actually looking into the ethers and seeing that is true. So I think these off-world pals just keep trying to feed and thread through this information, hoping that we at some point will find something that we can use. So today's podcast, I'm so excited. It's what is their plan and how do they communicate with us? Because this can get really confusing for people. How do they communicate with us? Because ETs have been communicating with the human race for a really long time. And back in the day, we've mistaken them for gods. They've done some pretty miraculous thing using harmonics, being able to float really large blocks off the ground, what we call anti-gravity devices. I mean, there's all this technology that we have that in part our United States military, and I'm sure other world governments too, have reversed engineered a lot of this technology to be able to boil it all down and figure out what it's for and how to use it. And we have anti-gravity propulsion now. It's not as slick as a lot of the off-world races are, yet we understand the principle of creating an artificial hull out of matter or antimatter, for that matter. That was meant to be funny. That's science humor. Pretty much, we know how to do that to a degree, not as well as they do. However, communicating with our ET folks and what they're here for and what's their plan and how do they communicate with us, we do run into some cultural hiccups. We run into some cultural hiccups there. And I have noticed this because I do a lot of interpretation for these beings. I'm an interpreter. I'm not just interpreting angels or people who've crossed over. I do a lot of off-worlder interpretation, especially for clients. We have so many what we call starseeds, people on Earth who started in an off-world area. I mean, I always say this, if you were a human being on Earth, Earth is not your first life. Let me just tell you that. This is not your first lifetime. It is too chaotic here. Earth interfaces electromagnetically and really ethereally, as well as dimensionally, with too many other volatile, realms or multiverses. So we can't really have the first timers partying around down here on Earth when one wrong move of the elbow could knock a bottle of nitroglycerin off the bar, okay? We really do have folks who are here. If you're here, first of all, it's certainly not your first life. And even the most youthful of souls has had many times around the sun before they even get, whatever sun and whatever universe they're from, before they even get a shot at Earth. Why is that important? Well, it's important because many of us who come here have started in off-world civilizations. I see this all the time. People coming in from Oturan or the Arcturians. People who have this collective consciousness or this collective way of being. People surfing in from the Pleiades. It's important to note in off-world history that the Pleiades sort of seeded many other worlds. They're one of the oldest civilizations, off-world civilizations, that interface with Earth and many other places. And we know them as the Subaru logo. They're the Seven Sisters. The beings, and there's not just one Pleiadian. I mean, that's like saying an Earthling, except we're talking about many worlds and many races. However, the Pleiades was really for our neck of the woods where everything kind of came from. And that's where the explorers who went off to Sirius AB came from. And later they went off, that's where the Uturan came from. So everybody ended up in these different areas. But now, I mean, these civilizations, both, whether it's the Uturan, whether it's Sirius AB, whether it's what we like to call the reptilians, we're not going to spend a lot of time on them because they're just kind of a buzzkill. However, the Pleiadians, I have this icky feeling in my chest. Whenever you even talk about the freaking reptilians, they have these little, how do you put it, psychic buoys or spiritual buoys that are out in the ether sphere. And when you talk about them, one of them pings. And I want you to think about the Soviet Union of the 1950s. And you've just tripped the spy radar and they start listening in. So hello, nothing interesting here. I'm really not even talking about your culture. So go back to what you're doing. The other cultures really have been heavily influencing, especially our race, for a long time. So when we ask, why are these beings coming here and why do they want to reach out to us and how do we speak to them, we do have some big cultural differences. Considering that even though everybody started out in the Pleiades, there's millions of years between the adaptation of the society out in Sirius, the Sirius AB folks, and Uturan and the Uturannak and the Arcturians and the Greys. And, other folks, going to trip your trigger again, like the reptilians, how are you guys, who show up in a lot of the Sumerian lore. We see dragon people. That's these guys. And I don't talk about them much because they kind of had their shot at trying to play well down here and they really didn't do a very good job. Some of them were absolutely delightful and really loved human beings. They're kind of a warring culture. They're a little more aggressive culture. They don't have the warm fuzziness. They're not really reptiles, yet they kind of resemble reptiles, and they really emotionally, in my opinion, resemble reptiles. So they're very cut and dried, very on and off. They kind of lean a little toward the dark spectrum of how you deal with life. So they're listening in to what I have to say, and I'm looking right back at them, and I'm waving at them, and they're highly disinterested in me, and I just look like a flailing unicorn, and now they are turning the page because I've completely lost their interest, which is fairly typical for the reptilians and I don't have a huge relationship with them, and they don't really want a relationship with me. They find me irritating. I'm not on their agenda. So when we're looking at the cultural differences between humanity and our ETs, there's a ton of them. Even though we share genome with our Sirius AB folks, if you're white, you are sharing genome with the Sirius AB folks. If you are from certain parts of Russia or China or the Asian Pacific countries, you're going to share genome with the Oturan. If you are from Africa or you are an indigenous person who is Maori or who is in the Southern Hemisphere, Aboriginal, you're pretty much 100% Earthling. Good for you. You kind of dodged a lot of this weird crap. And also our indigenous peoples our indigenous nations. You guys are pretty much the original occupants of Earth, and the rest of us just kind of came in and spread out, and we started out being your cousins and had a little more genome mixed in. And once in a while, you see starseed genome in people of color, obviously. That's actually a huge compliment to our communities of color, that they are the original inhabitants of this planet. And the rest of us kind of got hybrid jumped, not to say you beamed in white people from a spaceship or Asian people. It's to say that we all started in the cradle of civilization. We all started in Africa. And then some of the pockets of hominins, as we spread out over the earth, began to get noodled with genetically a lot more than the other pockets of hominins. So I believe strongly that that's why a lot of white supremacy exists in white people, because the Sirius AB folks are the conquestors. Well, that's not even right. They are the explorers. They are the explorers and the terraformers. And what happened when they thought it'd be a great idea to mix some of their genome with the hominins that existed here on Earth, what happened there is that you mixed the explorer and the reacher outer and the sharer and the terraformer with a mammal that is very territorial. So you took a territorial mammalian instinct and you mixed it with an explorer and somebody who wants to terraform and create a creator. And what you made is a conquestor. And that was sort of a weird accident. But anyway, that's another podcast. So pretty much, I'm complimenting our communities of color because they are legit. They are the folks who, for the most part, were noodled the very least with by our off-world communities, if even at all. So I think that's pretty cool, quite frankly. Anyway, when we're dealing with our off-world cultures, we are dealing with a lot of different translations of how to be. And me as a translator, even I will not understand sometimes what the off-world communities are getting at. And it might take me a minute because, again, you have to keep in mind that human beings, we literally, I'm not even kidding, we're just a shave off of being a monkey. We are really, really close to the bottom step of an evolutionary chain that puts us into a more, quote, intellectually ascended, if you want to put it that way of being. Using your thumbs in a different way. I personally don't think that human beings are all that intellectually ascended when we're talking about animals. I think the animal kingdom has them way more together than we do. Yet I think you understand what I'm getting at here. So when we're dealing with a species that's still so raw in its mammalian impulses, having weird sex behind dumpsters and binge eating at 2 a.m. where nobody can see it and, peeing on something just for fun. And I mean, really, you take a stick of deodorant away from human beings and we're one stinky animal is pretty much it. Okay. So we do have some cultural differences between ourselves and our off-world pals and our off-world cousins, our off-world family, mostly in the realm of motivation and what motivates us to do things. Now imagine being part of the culture of Sirius AB, which again, they are the travelers, they're the explorers, they're the terraformers, they're the ones who go in and out of Mars and in and out of Venus. And Venus, we could never even begin to survive on with its 900 degrees and its ammonia for air. And I mean, we'd just be fried like a crispy and gagging and popping like a scene from a 1980s sci-fi movie. It would be bad. So be us and Arnold Schwarzenegger gagging on Mars, So really, when we look at what motivates us, this is where we have cultural hiccups with our off-worlders. And they're really patient with me trying to learn their culture. They're trying to learn our culture too. I mean, they still don't understand. Honestly, they don't. They don't understand for why. At least the folks from Sirius AB don't. Our Oturan understand a little better. However, our folks from Sirius AB really don't get why, if we're so intelligent and compassionate and empathically connected, that we act so horribly to one another. They're still trying to understand the mammal chemistry, the territorialism, the fear response, the amygdala in the brain. I mean, they're still trying to decode all of this because they don't get why we as a species who are so fixated on loving our youth and connecting with other people when times are down. And the instinct of a little child is to share with another one. They kind of don't understand how we get so twisted sideways and gross later and why we allow ourselves to become so disenfranchised and why we allow ourselves to addict to different things like love and family and substance. We're still working on some communication issues. So, what's their plan for being here? Well, as I covered in part 1 of this podcast, a big part of their plan for being here is showing us how to be and sharing with us resources so that we don't need to fall into our base mammalian instincts, pick up a rock, and beat each other in the head with it. That's a big thing here. They want us to not have to sink to our lower fear octaves in order to survive. And they've noticed that we just limit ourselves. They notice that we cut ourselves off from our immense psychic abilities. They notice that we've been brainwashed by some pretty nasty powers that be, which goes way back to Sumeria, which goes way back to some reptilian occupation on the earth, where those particular beings really kind of got off on doing terrible things to human beings and subjugating them and all kinds of yucky stuff. So with this in mind, they're literally, if you want to think of it like a galactic council, like a united federation of planets, except we're not part of it. There is a group of beings that regularly use the earth, and there's some that I don't even talk about because they really don't interface with us hardly at all. They're interdimensional beings that come and go all the time, that really deal more with our elemental kingdom. And we do see residuals of these beings. We see little traces of them on cave paintings. If you've ever gone out looking at cave paintings, speaking of translational attributes here, and translating between different alien species or ET species and humans, if you've ever gone out and looked at cave paintings, there's an amazing walk that my sister-in-law, Melissa Siana, she's been on the podcast a million times. She's a ton of fun. And she and I do a guided walk out in the Pryor Mountains of Montana, where there's a significant number of UFO sightings, and there are UFOs in Big Pryor Mountain that come and go from the big limestone caves that are down in there. Lots of UFO sightings out there. And there's a particular walk that Melissa and I will do, a guided walk that takes folks back to a specific place in the Pryors to take a look at pictographs of UFOs. And they look exactly like what off-world craft look like when they're landing on top of your head. And, there's some folks who've called them shields and other things, but they really aren't. I mean, I've seen a number of off-world craft. I've seen a lot of UFOs. And certain ones, when they're above your head, look like something very specific. So out in this area, the native people, the indigenous people, documented trying to communicate to other natives who are coming through people through that area that was a heavy UFO area. And to kind of have a heads up about the UFOs, it's not that the indigenous people were scared of them. It's sometimes they had a very open, wonderful relationship with them. Sometimes it was just kind of a weird stay away from them relationship. It just depended. So in this particular area of the Pryor Mountains, and if you're ever in Montana, you can schedule, especially in the summertime now we're doing these, you can schedule these walks with Melissa and myself, either group walks or I'm doing private ones with people just because of COVID, so we keep the group size down. But if you ever are interested in going out and seeing these depictions of UFOs, as well as depictions of interdimensional beings that were drawn by the elementals and interdimensional beings next to the pictographs that were drawn by human beings, we'd be happy to show you. You can actually, this isn't meant to be a plug for these walks, but now that I stuck it out there, I should probably tell you where you can book one. If you go to Vintage Apothecary Shop, that's where Melissa books these walking tours. And we keep the group small, and we do private ones too, if you just want it to be a very, very small group. Anyway, that's where you can find it. But the reason I'm talking about this is because even our indigenous peoples were trying to communicate what they saw. And we have multi-dimensional or multiverse beings, which we could consider off-worlders because they live on planets in other dimensions that skip through to this dimension. And they don't look anything like us. They look more like manta rays or these weird, like if you could imagine like a mitochondria, and think A Wrinkle in Time, okay? Something that's got phalanges all around, looks like a giant cell, kind of like a giant sea cucumber with flitty fur around the outside of it that swims through a liquid type of space. These are interdimensional beings. So there's a ton of ETs or aliens or whatever you want to call them. But a lot of them really don't interface with us. They do much more interfacing with the elemental kingdom. They're coming through for other reasons. They're talking with Mother Earth. So I'm kind of just sticking to the races that deal with human beings, okay? And a lot of those, again, we've got the Oturan, we've got the Pleiadians, and we've got the folks from Sirius. So translationally, there's a lot to learn. And the Pleiadians are a lot more like angels. They are non-corporeal beings, most of them. There are still some corporeal worlds out there. But the folks in the Pleiades have been around for such a long time. If they don't want a body, they don't even need one. And a lot of times people, I say this often, but they mistake them for angels. They're a very high frequency being. They're a much more razor thin frequency. Angels are like a big pulsing nuclear reactor. They're just massive. You really can't miss them. And the laser pulse that you have with the Pleiadians is very powerful and it's very high vibration. So vibrationally, they can get confused pretty easily. So I do find, speaking with the Pleiadians, they have a way of translating their own messages into human. And they oftentimes do sound what we think would be an angelic presentation. A lot of this kills me. Okay, so I see a lot of interpreters out there, and I God bless everybody. Everybody's got their job as an interpreter. And there's a lot of folks who speak light languages. And there are people who translate messages from angels as well, in addition to the light languages. And some people think the light languages are angel messages. Some people think that they are alien languages. I notice when I listen to people rattle off light languages that they are an amalgamation of several different other off-world languages, and really they have to do with the vibration and creating an attenuation in our ether sphere that lifts ickiness out of it. Like, think of an ultrasonic vibration that vibrates out particles from an ultrasonic washing machine. That's what this light language does. It's not as much about what it says as it's about the frequency of what it creates. But anyway, because we're talking about, how to communicate with these beings and what's their plan and how can we miss the boat with them. The Pleiadians are going to be the most human of all when they are communicating with us. And it's not that they're human at all. It's that they have a little more practice. They're one of the oldest races in our neck of the woods. And they have a lot more practice actually even conversing with the angelic realm, who's kind of one of their many duties is dealing with our messy butts down here. So they've learned a great deal about how to communicate. So why am I telling you all this? Because we're talking about gaps in communication that can happen between our off-worlders and, what's their plan and how do they talk to us? And with the Pleiadians, when I'm reading online many people's angelic interpretations, what they're actually translating, as I look at the syntax and I look at the way that the words are laid out, is a Pleiadian message. But you got to keep in mind that the Pleiadians work really closely with the angelic realm. They're like the right-hand man for the angels. The angels are the right-hand man for the Pleiadians. They're all working for the good of the universe. So who cares if it's Pleiadian and it's not angelic? Really? Are we really going to split hairs that hard? I don't think so. I don't think it's worth that. So, when you're looking at something from that perspective, I will be reading these translations and thinking, wow, this person is saying they're translating angels. It's a very high vibrational, very light being. It's a light being. It's a Pleiadian being. But that's probably the, I would say, frequency that individual picks up the most, perhaps. And that honestly, there's probably an angel working with that Pleiadian to get that message through anyway, even though the Pleiadian is going to translate it in a specific way. When I see things that say dear ones and whatnot, I'm like, oh, that's a Pleiadian going on. Angels don't call us dear ones. I mean, they could honestly give one crap. Angels are like, here's your message. I hope you get it. You're one of many temporal species. You're probably temporary. Love you, bye. They're just so like, blah. Anyway. So even though I am immersed in communication with these beings 24/7, all the time, even I will have cultural hiccups with them and not understand something. So I've shared bits and pieces of this story on different podcasts, but I'm going to share some parts I have never shared before on this podcast about a translational hiccup I had with some folks from Sirius AB last summer. And this is very recent. This was in 2020. And my wife and myself and both my sisters-in-law, we were out camping. And we were camping on Big Pryor Mountain. And really, I'm okay to hang in the Pryor foothills. You get up on Big Pryor Mountain and the ether changes up there. It just gets weird. It gets weird. And you can feel it. Like you just feel like somebody's watching you. There's a very high EMF index there. It's uncomfortable, I feel. But it's beautiful. And there's a ton of little people up there, elementals. The ethers are so thin. There's massive amounts of ice caves in the Pryor Mountains in Montana. And the Pryors are kind of, you don't hear about the Pryors. The Pryors are a very, very old mountain range. And I've talked about them a lot on this podcast because geographically they are very interesting. Basically, they slope up from one side and they're very steep on the other because they were pushed up from one side. So imagine like doing a push-up, right? Where your hands are down there and your shoulders are in the air and then your body tapers off down to your ankles where you're on your toes. It's because one side of your body is pushed up further. So the Pryors have a very interesting geomagnetic index, and they've got a lot of uranium, natural uranium there. In the 40s, there were tons of uranium mines. So there's a lot of off-worlders that come and go from the Pryors, and we were camping out there. And like I said, you might recognize parts of this story, but there's other parts you might not. And we were all just sitting there waiting for the sun to go down, and the sun was going down. And that I call it the milky blue part, where you look off to the horizon and there's a big red strip right over the mountains where the sun is set. And the sky is still light, but it's kind of that blue color. And if you look on the other side, it's starting to get kind of a dark blue color. So all the stars are starting to pop out. And we're all sitting around the campfire, and right above me is this massive, all the planets are coming out first, and there's this massive planet that's coming out. And we're looking at this planet, and we're all looking at this star formation. Everybody's basically looking up and having a conversation for about 20, 25 minutes. So this humongous planet that we're looking at that's right overhead, all of a sudden it just takes off, and it just starts moving. And you guys, it's not the space station. I mean, the space station mirror just keeps traveling. It doesn't stay stationary and then take off. This was a massive, massive craft. And I don't think it was an accident that it was sitting right over the top of Big Pryor Mountain. And I don't think it was an accident that it was so low or took off after a time. So here's my translational hiccup. I love to talk to off-worlders. I want to learn from them. I want to tell them all about all kinds of things. So when you speak in your head or out loud with intention while looking at a UFO, knowing it's a UFO, you make with your consciousness a connection with that craft, okay? It's your consciousness that hails them, like a Star Trek episode. You don't need mechanical anything to hail a UFO. Not the Sirius AB craft, not the Oturan, none of them. Your consciousness hails the craft. So I'm aware of this, and I'm sitting there, and I get super excited, and then, my wife's like, what the heck? Oh, my God. And my sisters-in-law are like, oh, my God, that's ridiculous. What is that? Wow. Because it's really strange that this giant thing is it didn't shoot off either. It just kind of took off on this steady pace. So I start talking to this thing. And I start saying out loud, I'm like, hi, you guys, wait, don't go. Please come back and talk to us and tell us all about yourselves, and we'll share a campfire with you. Come back and talk to us. Talk to me. I want to see, you're so welcome. You're welcome back at this campsite, blah, blah, blah. Right? They kept on trucking. And I had this weird feeling. I'm like, I actually think they're going to come back. So I kept my eyes peeled for, majority of the night. It gets dark. The campfire's wearing down. We've all on a giant sugar high now from too many s'mores. It's time to go to bed. So I go into the camper and we, go inside and lay down, and it's time to go to sleep. Well, while I'm in the camper, I'm laying down, and all of a sudden it just feels eerie. And a lot of times that's how UFOs will feel, because they change the electromagnetic index as they get in close proximity. And our body is very electromagnetic. It's sensitive to EMF. The brain is. And that's why you hear in cases of hauntings, okay, or supposed hauntings, there may be a poorly grounded old washer and dryer room with a 210 socket in an old house, and it's bad wiring. So there's too much EMF flooding out into the ethers, and people will claim that they're being washed by ghosts in their washroom because of the poor grounding, because too much EMF plays a trick on the brain and makes it feel like it's being watched, because our brain interprets that as a presence, okay? So anyway, you get a UFO going on, and there is a presence. This EMF index is raising. So here I am, my wife is asleep, and for some weird-ass reason, okay, we have this really cool camper that I love, and the table, you can make it into a bed. Well, we just leave it a bed all the time because we go outside and eat and blah. So basically, we use the camper because it's got a toilet inside, and you haul the junk back to town and dump it in town. And it's basically just a bathroom and a bedroom. And there is a stove and other things, but we never use that. There is a window on the front of the camper that is right over the bed. Now, we've really never opened this because I'm so dang light sensitive, I can't sleep. But for some reason, I decided it was a real good idea to open this giant window right above the bed. This was not a good idea. So here I am laying there. It's getting eerie. I can't figure out why it's so eerie. And I'm about ready to sit up and close this window. And there is the saying of I'm compelled to do something. I was compelled to do something. So there was a thought that was laid over the top of my own mind while I'm laying there. And I could tell it wasn't me. It was like if somebody put a wash rag over your head that was a thought. And the thought was, you need to go outside right now. Go outside, go outside, go outside. But it was disturbing. Like, it was disturbing because it was such an outside thought. Like, it wasn't like there was a voice inside my head. And we're talking about how do extraterrestrials communicate with us and what can be some cultural hiccups. So this was a cultural hiccup that happened with me and the folks from Sirius AB, big time. So I told them to come back. I told them I wanted to talk to them and see their ship and explain all the things and sit by the campfire and the whole 9 yards. I told them to come visit. And they did. But they didn't want to disturb anybody else in the camper, which was my wife. So they were saying, come outside. They weren't saying it. It was a compulsion, like a thought that I knew wasn't my own thought. And I kicked it out. I'm like, I'm not going outside. It's the middle of the damn night. There are grizzly bears up here. We're at 8,000 feet on top of Pryor Mountain. I am not going outside. And as I resisted this, the thought was turned up. The thought was amplified. You need to go outside. You have to go outside. Now I'm just getting pissed because I'm a person and I'm Italian. And I'm like, don't you be freaking telling me what to do in my own damn camper, you asshat, whatever you are. I am not going outside. No. And I was worried all of a sudden. I had a worry that flooded my mind that whatever this was would hurt my family. So the compelling, the thought that they were beaming into my head and they were trying to invite me out to come outside because they were outside and wanted to say hi. Okay? But that's not how this went down. It seemed very aggressive. And this compelling thought all of a sudden ratcheted up. And it was this thought that was just replaying over and over again that was, your family doesn't need you. You're a terrible wife. You're a terrible person. Your family is so much better off without you. You need to leave that camper right now and just walk straight to the trees, because they were in the trees. And this is a compelled thought that's laid on top of my consciousness. So I'm realizing this isn't my own thought, but it's playing with the chemistry that creates emotions in my brain. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm super depressed all of a sudden. Like, I am so filled with woe that I could be literally this thought that's being pressed into my brain is you are a loser. You are a crushing disappointment to that woman next to you. She doesn't even deserve you. She's so better off without you. Just leave and go to the trees. It's not really funny. It's funny now. It was not funny at the time because I'm like in tears because I feel like such a bag of garbage that apparently I'm such an asshat loser piece of crap that I'm so bad for my family, right? This is this thought that's being pressed onto my head. Now, I realize that this isn't my own thought, and I'm realizing whatever this is really desperate to get me outside. And then I'm recognizing that it pretty much figured that it picked up a fear cue that I wanted to protect my wife. So it was just telling me, it was just laying on top of me, oh, no, you don't need to worry about her. She thinks you're a loser anyway. Come on outside. Now, these alien beings, let me catch you up a minute. The folks from Sirius AB were not trying to convince me that my wife hated me and that I was a loser. They were trying to free me from the fear trap or from the attachment that would not have me come outside. But it didn't really work. It just made me feel like shit. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm fussing, and Rebecca wakes up because my wife is this massive empath, just a huge empath. And she says, what is wrong with you? And I said, can I ask you a question? She says, oh my God, the anxiety coming off of you is horrifying right now. What is going on? And I said, I need to ask you something. Do you think I'm a crushing disappointment? Have I ruined your life? Have I ruined you and Nora, our daughter? And she's like, no, what the hell are you talking about? So I explained what's going on. And I explained that this implied thought is now demanding that I leave my family and go outside to the trees, walk to the trees, just keep on walking to the trees. They're better off without you. You don't need to see them again. Come to us in the trees. So my wife grabs onto my arm in the camper and she's hanging on to me. And she says, you are not going the F outside. And I said, well, I know that. But I'm kind of in tears because the emotional application of this sucks, even though I know it's not true, even though I know it's an implied thought. It's this thing that's beaming in. We are having a severe cultural breakdown. They're trying to invite me to come out and see their craft and talk to them and whatever. But we are having a really hard time in translation here. So the whole time this is happening, by the way, I am hearing this hum that is so low. It's like, it sounds like a big refrigerator, but it's like, it's half in my head and half out of my head. And I wanted to know if I was going nuts. So I kept plugging my ears. And when I'd plug my ears, then it would almost go away. And I'd unplug my ears. And so it was outside. I could hear this frequency. And it was like this super low, like this, but like octaves below that, okay? Like this. And I could feel it. And it was coming from inside Big Pryor Mountain. And so here's me having a meltdown. My wife's hanging on to me for dear life. I'm not even kidding. And I'm breathing weird, and this is an uncomfortable experience. And I say to her, do you hear that humming? And she says, no. And now I'm just like, oh, God dang it. I've lost my ever-loving mind. I'm having the worst cultural breakdown with these guys. So I said, you don't hear that humming? And she says, no, I don't. And I'm realizing the humming is attached to this frequency of this implied thought that's trying to, it's not a voice. It's like if I didn't know better, if I didn't understand the translational aptitudes as well as I did, I would think I was having some psychotic breakdown with myself telling me to do things that I don't believe in that I would never do. But obviously that wasn't happening because I could tell it wasn't my own thought process. So we're having this cultural mishap. And so I start speaking back to these beings and I'm like, listen, in my head, I'm like, I think I know I invited you back. I think you're the guys from the craft. I think we got off on the wrong foot. And now you've just made me feel really, really bad. Like now I don't even want to meet you because now I feel like a dirtbag and that my family hates me. So thanks for triggering that in my brain chemistry, you guys. That is not a good way to get somebody to go outside. We are a mammal-based species. Don't freak us out. Like, don't be the eagle shadow over the mouse on the ground. We will automatically hide. So this isn't really working out. And I appreciate that you came back. And I started saying, I invoke the law of love. I invoke the law of love. That's a big serious AB thing. And all of a sudden this attachment or this implied thought just kind of relaxed. And then it switched gears entirely. And out of nowhere, I was so claustrophobic, I couldn't stand it. I mean, I'm not a claustrophobic person, honestly. I mean, maybe I would be buried alive in a coffin suffocating. That would be claustrophobic. But not in a camper, please. A nice new one. And all of a sudden, I was heinously claustrophobic. And my heart was racing. I was having this anxiety attack. And the message was, boy, it sure is claustrophobic in there. You should come outside. You should come outside where there's fresh air. You should come outside. Well, now I'm just mad about this whole thing. And I started laughing and I said, hey, guess what, Rebecca? Now I have mystery claustrophobia and it wants me to go outside. And she kind of raises her voice and we're the only people in the camper. And she's like, look, you mother effers, she's not going outside. She's like, you're not going outside. They're going to take you up in that ship and I will never see you again. And I'm like, I think that's sort of the plan. And I think I didn't represent myself well. This is sort of my fault. So this whole time I'm saying to these ETs, thank you so much for coming, guys. We really got off on the wrong foot. I don't think it's a good idea for me to leave with you right now. I'm just, thank you for coming. And they just, at this point, they're committed. They're like, no, come out here, come to the trees. And then they moved the craft and it was like way down this draw because there was kind of a meadow and they were in the trees. They moved it right out in back of the camper and I could feel this EMF shift and there were like crickets outside and they just shut up, got really quiet and the humming got louder, which Rebecca didn't hear, but I did. And they're like, no, just go outside. We're just right to the trees in the back. We're just right in the trees in the back. And I kept hearing this, sit up and look out the window. And I'm like, I am not sitting up and looking out the window and seeing a bunch of Sirius AB silhouettes in the trees. I will literally piss this bed. At the state I was in, I'm like, I'm not doing it. Even I have a line, even though I knew they weren't out to get me, but now I was all spun sideways and this just wasn't going well. So I thanked them very much and I said no. And then this Native American who had died, the ghost of this Native American who basically had his head twisted backwards, his head was hanging down his back, this ghost, that was a little unnerving, came running up and shooed off the extraterrestrials, shoot them off energetically, and came back with his head kind of flopped backwards, and told me that they didn't have a right to be there, and they didn't have the right to take the people, and that they would take people from that spot sometimes, and that was not their land, and that they shouldn't be there. And he had a bad negative run-in with them. And it wasn't that they broke his neck. I think whatever the dynamics were, like maybe he ran into an energetic field or something, but they were not directly responsible, but kind of responsible for how he was killed. And again, it was an accident. This was not purposeful. Yet this native was just, and this is Crow country, the Crow Nation down in the Big Prairie Mountain. And this was a Crow spirit keeper. He was a Crow medicine man. And he came back and said, I'm here to protect you. And the minute he showed up, the humming stopped, they left, they went away. These beings are not evil, gang, yet sometimes we can get off on the wrong foot with them. And they're really enthusiastic. And they were really looking forward to talking to me and giving me a big ride on their ship. And they just hit me the wrong way. It didn't work out right. So when we talk about all these beings coming and what do they want and why haven't they just shown up and talked to us? Well, this is kind of why. They have a different way of communicating and they're still learning from us what would be an appropriate way to do that. And they're not here to hurt me. They didn't want to hurt me. The next morning I got up and I felt terrible. I felt so hungover. It was awful. I was grumpy. I was weird. I was snarky. And literally I woke up and we tore down that camper. I wanted the hell off that mountain. We got down the mountain and the further we got from Big Prairie Mountain, it's like more of my particles just started coming back in. And the minute we got down off that mountain, all of a sudden I just kind of snapped to. And my wife even said, she's like, wow, are you okay? I think you're finally all back. That was scary. And I said, it was scary and I'm probably not going to do that again. But I learned, I learned about the invitation that I extended. Because the other thing is when you're looking at a UFO in the sky and you hail them with your consciousness, I don't want you to be afraid of them. I don't want you to think they're all going to come and try to impose creepy thoughts in your head. I made a really strong connection that had a very pointed need to get on that ship and meet them and blah. That was me. That wasn't them. They were trying to communicate with me using the same intensity, and it just kind of went weird. So that was me, not them. They are so conscientious, they don't just want to pop up and start chatting. So, they later, in their own little way, sort of apologized. I could feel them high up in the ethers as they would fly over, and they'd be like, oh, sorry, we'll just try next time, okay? I don't know what happened. And I'm like, it's okay, you guys. It was me. I set the wrong tone here. However, this is why they don't just land and start talking. And our folks from Sirius are very literal. They are very, very literal. They're the ones that helped build Egypt. And look how literal the Egyptians were in everything. So, what are they here for? How do they communicate? Well, they communicate through emotions. What they picked up my deep need to meet them, my deep need to see that ship, my deep need to have them land and get on there. And they were just trying to make that happen. That was me, not them. They're like, okay, get on, sister, whatever. We circle back. So when we're saying, what are these ETs? What are these off-worlders here to teach us? What are they here to bring us? Well, in the first podcast, I talked about alternative energy plans, okay? They are also here to show us that we are part of a bigger universe. It's not just us. Part of their plan is to teach us and integrate us so that we'll stop killing each other. They think we're pretty cool. They want to share things with us. Those ETs were not trying to convince me I was a piece of crap. They just were going through my mental file thinking, well, what the hell would get her away from her wife? Oh, here's one. Her wife thinking she was a piece of crap. That'll work. Let's try that one. Let's release those chemicals up there. So they don't have brain control. They don't have mind control. They are trying to vibrationally and emotionally connect with us in the same way. So if you're going to reach out to our off-world friends, just make sure that you're just totally full of love and extend an invitation, but just to come hang out where you are. Not that you have to go to them or not that they have to land and show you a ship or anything. Just open your heart up when you see these ships and just be like, hi. This was probably the most acute misinterpretation I've had with the folks from Sirius. Normally, we're pretty on the same page. And there have been other times, there was a Sirius ship that came in when my wife and I and my daughter were living in Bozeman. We lived up there for about a year. And we had this gorgeous lodge that we lived in out in Gallatin Gateway. And that's out of town. And it's right up against the foothills. If you go to Big Sky, you pass Gallatin Gateway as you're coming down the hill. And so it was pretty extraordinary. We were sitting out and there was a big storm, and then it was a very clear part of the sky with a big full moon. And what looked like a very abrupt shooting star flew through into the atmosphere. And it was like a blur, but it was blindingly bright. And then all of a sudden it was like this floating fireball that was coming down, and it would pulse and stop falling and then come down. It was so big that even that far up in the atmosphere, my wife and I could see it was on fire, and it was way up there. It was huge, and it was floating, and then it would, pulse and stop. It was just it was falling on fire. And what I realized, because I connected immediately with it, recognized that it was a Sirius AB ship, and I could feel all these beings in this ship panicking because they didn't come through that vortex in the right way because of this massive, massive upper atmosphere, huge Rocky Mountain electrical storm. It had screwed up their vortex opening. It had screwed up their landing point, okay? So there was some serious interdimensional friction, and it just wrecked, like if you came in at the wrong angle on our atmosphere and just blew your craft apart. They came dimensionally in wrong, and I knew that. And I said to Rebecca, oh my God, they're all panicking. That ship is crashing. They are plummeting to the earth, and it's on fire. So I sat there and connected with these beings so they would know they weren't alone. The serious folks don't do so well. If they start panicking, their brains go offline and they just don't know what to do. They skits out like a weird robot. Where do you think we get that, white people? Huh? Where do you think we get that? Hello? So I'm looking at this ship and it's coming down and my heart just opens up and I just connect with them. You can call it telepathically, but it was really a heart connection. And I start saying to this ship, I invoke the law of love. You are not alone. You are not alone. I see you. You're going to be okay. I see you. You've got this. Calm down. You've got this. And by God, that crew was just like, there was about 9 of them that were trying to get everything, this giant craft, to stop plummeting. And it's like, that scene with Sharon Moonstruck. Snap out of it. They just kind of looked at me and I looked at them and I said, I invoke the law of love. You're not alone. I got you. You got this. And they were able to calm down and remember that these craft have biological components in them. Okay. And pretty soon this thing that was just plummeting on fire, it started to pulse and it would like be buoyant a minute and then it would fall a little bit and then it would pulse a little more. And it would be a little more buoyant. And pretty soon the flames were out. And then it was just this gentle pulsing orb that it was slowly descending. They controlled the descent. And they were controlling the descent with themselves. That craft was shot. If you don't mind my language, it was shot to shit. It was shot out. However, because of the biological components of these Sirius AB craft, they could literally interface with it and heal it and repair it, and they could become the artificial hull. So they got their consciousness together and they landed that orb in the mountains, which was across the valley. And no sooner had they got that down, all of a sudden I'm looking around and all of these helicopters are coming out of nowhere that are just descending on where that orb landed. And so these are the beings from Sirius, and they responded so well to the love and to the support. So when we talk about how to communicate with these beings, speak emotionally. If you hit them with intellect, if you hit them with intense intellect and you want to know something, by God, they're going to show up in your backyard and they'll show you, but it may be uncomfortable. So just having the love, and they were so grateful. Once they got command of this ship, they literally all sent me back this like big thank you pulse, like, thank you. Oh God, thank you. And I said, it's okay. You got this, you guys, you're going to be okay. And I'm sure they were military helicopters that probably clocked them coming in at such an abrupt pulse, because they were so high up in the atmosphere. I'm sure the military had time to get there from Great Falls, which isn't that far. So, what do they want here? And how do we communicate with them? Well, we communicate through emotions and we communicate through kindness and love and connection and support. That's what they're trying to teach us. Because through these ways of being, this is how we end up saving the planet. Honestly, their plan is to help us recognize our superhero powers. Their plan is not to scare us. Their plan is to kind of show us where we're at in the universe, and to show us magnificent things, and to invite us to grow, and to show us that we do not need to subjugate other beings in order to have power or even to eat. I mean, these are beings that don't exactly eat by chewing things up and swallowing and pooping. I mean, they have a whole different way of interpreting energy through their body. And the Oturan, they suck up energy. They literally suck it up through their skin, and that's how they eat. And they have heavily affected what we think of as Taoist or Buddhist teachings. We've got the Pleiadians also, who heavily affected the Hindu teachings. And the Pleiadians are also frequency-based eaters, if you want to call it that, which is why you have some of these gurus in India who can literally float, not eat one single stitch of anything, and stay alive because they've altered their system to ingest the energies to keep their system alive. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can learn from our off-world cousins. And we do have some translational issues, which is why I would love to go work for any of our world governments in translating with these folks. And I think there are some folks out there, who already are translators for them. Yet I've learned so much over the last 20 years and over one failed abduction attempt and one successful abduction attempt from the folks from Autour. We had a weird little go around. And that's another story. I've told the story before on different podcasts. I've written about it in my book. And if you want to read that story, that is in my book, True Tales of the Truly Weird, Real Paranormal Accounts from a Real Psychic. And you can find that book on Amazon. But there's a big detailing of basically getting abducted and being tried to get abducted, which failed and they learned, and why that happened. And it wasn't because they were stealing my eggs to make, hybrid demon babies or something. They were doing some work and I was trying to learn from them because I'm an interpreter. So we have so much to learn from our off-world friends. And if you do get off on the wrong foot with an off-worlder for some reason, unless they're our friends, the reptilian types who really aren't that friendly and really aren't here to make friends, and they really aren't coming around all that much because if you want to call it the Galactic Council of Aliens that keeps the balance of power equal on the planet of Earth, they do kick those guys' butts and make sure that they don't subjugate humans like they did at one time. That got stupid for a while. If you find yourself in a scary position, just know that our off-world pals are not trying to scare us. We probably are just interpreting something incorrectly. And put out there, I invoke the law of love. I invoke the law of love. I invoke the law of love. It will let them know that you are under duress and that you are trying to speak through your duress in a way and in a language that lets them know you're in duress, so they should maybe try another approach. They understand what that means. That means back off and reset. I invoke the law of love. That means back off and reset. And they will. And they're not trying to scare us. So they want to help us out. They want us to go further with our technologies. And in part 3 of the podcast, I'm going to be talking all about the different I told you about that little panel that sucks all kinds of really cool electricity out of the air for electronic things. Wait till I tell you about the propulsion they want us to have, the water cleaning devices. I mean, I'd love to tell you about the off-world tech that they're trying to share with us and the knowledge that they have about how to unlock our greatest psychic abilities. So it's the sharing of off-world tech and what it is and how we can unlock our psychic abilities and our spirit abilities so that we can communicate with God better, with angels better. These beings know that there's a being out there that created all things. They know we call it God. They know there's that energy field or that consciousness. They're very aware of it. They talk to it all the time. They are one with it. They are in union and synchronicity with that being. So not only is there cool off-world tech that they want to share with us, but in part 3, I will share with you what they have shared with me about how they and their own species and races have overcome impulses for violence, for war, and how the human race can lock together in an incredible biosphere and biounit and not only improve everything on this planet instantaneously, but improve other multiverses. So part 3 is about sharing this incredible tech that they want to share with us, how they've overcome violence and how they've overcome their shortcomings, and also tips they have for us, especially those that share genome with certain different races, as well as tips for folks who have as little as possible. Actually, there's very little tips there, because if we look at our indigenous nations, they're just part of the earth. They're part of spirit. They're part of it all. They haven't separated themselves. And our tribal nations in Africa haven't separated themselves from the earth like we have. You ever wonder why? Because they really live here, and we're creepy hybrids, white people. So there you go. All right, I can't wait till part 3, and we're just going to let you stretch out, and maybe it's time to go watch some X-Files, or maybe it's time to just go put a good TV show on. And might I recommend a show called The Nevers on Netflix? It's excellent. So maybe now is a good time for you to go watch The Nevers. I think this is a good lead-in to The Nevers. Okay, gang, I'm loving this series, and I will see you in part 3.